Hi, I'm Mikey. This is Tyler. We're the founders of Innovative Start Organization, a nonprofit that teaches financial literacy. And in these videos slash talks, we discuss different financial and economic impacts. Today, we're going to be discussing the government shutdown and how that impacts you financially and or economically. Now, if you don't necessarily have a direct tie to the federal government, it probably doesn't have anything that's specific to you, but there are some things that trickle out of it just for the temporary shutdown that it is. So, getting into it, I guess the main part is the workers within the federal government and what that means for them. So, whenever there's a shutdown, usually people who are non-essential, which is a great deal or a number of people, depending on what it is, but you can think like anything from national parks and, like I said, anything that's federally funded or has federal workers in that sense. And again, like I said, those that are non-essential are furloughed, and furloughed just means that you're sitting home without pay. Some of those workers could still be working without pay, but that's just kind of like the extent to it. That applies to Congress and stuff, I'm pretty sure, right? But I think that doesn't even really matter to them. They probably make so much money outside of whatever their wages is in Congress. So, but that also applies to them. So, um, again, the government shutdown, biggest impact as far as that goes is just one, if you do work in that capacity for the government or whatever it is, or if you're a federal worker, that impact is shown there. Now, some other things that we'll take a look at um, is some of the other actions, which I think I have here in my notes, some of the delays that happen from that. So, passports and visa processing. Obviously, that's a big thing if you're getting ready to travel out of the country soon. That or you're an international student and you're trying to get your visa renewed or whatever it is within the US. That's delayed because obviously that's handled by the federal government. Um, Small business loans, SBAs, if that's something that relates to you as a small business owner, if that's something that you can apply to, obviously that's delayed again too. Federal housing loans, I'm gonna push that over to you, Tyler, as far as like FHAs. Do you know anything about that? As far as I'm trying to think, is that more so?
So FHA is will buy mortgages, so
Hmm.
they provide liquidity to the real estate market
Hmm.
for majority of the time first time home buyers, things like that. I'm not sure how much the liquidity dries up. I would assume it'd be more like manpower, but then
Hmm.
again, like we're speaking in such broad terms, some of this is so political and heated,
Hmm.
and it's not consistent. Like that's when we were doing our research. Some people are furloughed, some people are still paid, some people are work without pay.
Hmm.
A lot of this is very confusing. It's clunky, it's complicated, and it's not. I don't know. It's hard to understand. At least I'll speak for myself. For me, so yeah. Long story short, I'm not sure how much it'll affect the FHA
Hmm.
mortgages,
I was gonna
but that is
say,
a federal government agency.
and we kind of missed the part, but just basically what the government shutdown is essentially is a disagreement amongst the, I guess, branches. So whenever they're trying to pass laws or whatever, that's usually the issue that comes in soon. I think I forgot how many there were last year, if there's just one, but I feel like they happen a lot more often than people think. And again, like I said, if you don't work um, for the government in a federal sense, I don't know how much it applies to state government or anything like that. I'm not sure that's the case, but federal government operations and workers are impacted by those shutdowns. And again, like I said, has to deal with um, more like it's a temporary slash short term thing. There's no exact end dates on them. It's just usually when there's an agreement that can come whenever they want to resume. which is also interesting. I would like to know the history of some of those things and like some of the older government shutdowns, maybe just throughout history, what they've been over. It's also interesting because we in the United States have a two-party system, even though it was never supposed to be built that way. But when you have so much economic power on either side, as far as like funding those parties and everything else, it's hard to have, you know, your other parties, which I think is like slim to none whenever, you know, election time comes around. But just something to think about as far as like people are, you know, the two political party system is not what it's supposed to be, but at least
I'll I may
nonetheless.
add there something real quick, but like one thing I was learning as we are sitting here doing this, because we always heard about this,
Mhm,
um, is that it's Congress essentially has to vote on the funding bill for our federal government. And
mhm,
so right now, as we're talking about this, it's October 9th. So right now, there still has not been an agreement made for the funding for the federal government.
mhm,
And from my understanding, there's some the topics that are at hand to discuss have to do with a lot of the heated political debates like immigration,
mhm.
healthcare, things like that. And so it's essentially blocking funding for other things. So I just want to add that in real quick.
And yeah, and I think it's some other interesting parts, which, again, we try to not be biased in these things, but um, for any sense of like some of the things that we're discussing here and everything else, like always feel free to do your own research, and also stay informed that way too. Obviously, we can bring up certain things within the news and um, talk to you guys about what we feel about it or what our opinion is towards it. But again, we always say just do your own due diligence. I think one of the biggest things that we look at whenever it comes to like the interests of the people, right, who you elect, they're supposed to represent your interests from your state or whatever. That's how it's, you know, built out in the Constitution. But one of the biggest factors that I feel like play a huge role is one, um, the ability to what's that word for it? I think forgetting it, but it's where companies can essentially bid to get party members to vote in their favor. It's like a legal loophole. What's
Oh,
that word I'm looking for?
yeah, why am I blanking on it now?
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
blanking on too. Uh,
it's they pay it's lobbying,
it's lobbying,
lobbying.
yes.
Yep.
You can lobby in Congress saying, hey, you know, I'm gonna spend this much money for you to. Also like political donations, which is also crazy. I don't. It's always so crazy to me because it's like you look at it and you're like, oh, why would you know my congressman vote this way or whatever? But you gotta look at like who's funding them, who's, you know, pulling their leg and their strings. And then you also have to think that whatever political party they're aligned with, and then, you know, the people within Congress that they're also aligned with, you know, their buddies in there, how things are going to shift and shape themselves in that. So you might say, oh, you know, I voted they had all these tendencies, and then, you know, they turned the other cheek on you. And you're like, like I didn't expect that. But I think that's just the name of the game. It's easier said than done. A lot of the times, people who have the right intentions, like some of those other like lobbying, I guess, businesses that advocate for certain things, are also, you know, on the other side of that. I would say like your biggest lobbyists are probably pharmaceutical and oil companies, and the U.S. eats that up. So especially those in Congress because they got that big money to fund that. But again, do your own research. Take a look into it. I think one of the biggest things you can do, go ahead, hit up the old Schoolhouse Rock uh, bill video. You probably YouTube that. I don't know if they play Schoolhouse Rock anymore, but I do remember those times. Anyways,
Yeah, I do.
um, and then as far as like I said, business impact and economic impact. Whenever there's a halt like that, obviously work is not being done in the sense of, whatever we need to accomplish. So GDP can be impacted. And again, small businesses or anybody else that's relying on any type of federal funding or anything along those lines, it'll look to have some impact on there. Tyler, anything else you want to add to that?
Yes, I always do your research. These are very hot political
Hmm.
topics. Um, so, get both sides. And but I do think it is really important to understand how the money works, you know, um, how people vote certain ways, who they're paid by, how much they're paid, and there's a I think the younger generation has done a good job at calling out some of this,
Hmm.
but there's so much money that goes into lobbying,
Hmm.
and we have people that are, you're supposed to serve. They say they're to serve the American people, and they walk away with millions and tens of millions of dollars.
Hmm.
Um, I think some of that should be disclosed because
Hmm.
they are in closed doors, and this is just my opinion, my personal opinion, but it really does affect us as, financial literacy, things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so.
Um, there is insight. It can be insider trading essentially. If someone has information before
Hmm.
others, that has a say so in the stock market and what we're trying to do here, and teach financial literacy. So I don't know. Take that for what it's worth and do your own research.
For sure. And to emphasize on what Tyler is saying, like, um, those things impact, how you invest and everything else, market validity, everything that you're looking at as far as like, okay, and there are people that track whenever Congress members trade or whatever, and they're supposed to disclose as required by law, but like they have like a time frame to do so. So by the time you even see it, they've already made their, trade or whatever it is and profited or took their loss. I would say another thing too, when it comes to trading, especially people who there's two sides of it, right? And I was talking to you about this the other day, Tyler, when you sent me that video. I don't know if you remember about the lady who renovated like $1 million or so for that condo here in Phoenix. And I was telling you she probably was taking a loss for that because of the case. There's people that because obviously taxes and everything else. This is why you should do your own due diligence and everything else. Because then you can see how these big money makers, navigate. And I don't know who their accountants are, but obviously there's some smart people. Um, but there's a lot of things you can do to, navigate your own finances. A lot of people operate businesses at a loss for certain aspects and things like that. So if you ever get into the aspect of like, okay, I'm gonna, look at why this person's not paying this amount of money or whatever it is, always be looking at that bottom line. And learn how to read financial statements. It is the most boring thing to look at, but if you understand like how that works and everything else, you'll see how certain people just navigate their own finances. But to go back into that, if a Congress member takes a huge loss on a trade, obviously they didn't do that on purpose. I mean, on accident, but they did that on purpose in that sense. Because you get a certain amount of deductions for your losses, or you can net them. But yeah, I think there's so many things to learn from financial literacy, taxes, and even the government stuff wise. Obviously, it always plays a big role. Um, Paying attention to those things, as we always say in every single video, just make sure that one, you're understanding how it impacts you. A lot of times, slight movements might not have a direct impact to you, but they might come as like, an invisible hand in that sense of just like, if it impacts one market, it might come to you at your table, essentially, or whatever that looks like. So, I know one of the biggest discussions and what I've seen a lot of news about is some of the farmers here in the U.S. And some other things that have to do with like the tariffs and such. So, keep a close eye on that. We might talk about that in a further discussion. Um, but yeah, that is all from me. Tyler, anything else from you before we wrap up?
Yeah, just like we always try to mention here, like just do your research, take both sides, or like look at both sides, and there's a lot of layers to a
Hmm.
lot of this. You know, uh, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So,
Yeah.
and just we the way that our government works, at least here in the United States, and things like that. and just remember the also it's some people can get discouraged, but
Hmm.
then again, the people that are voting for this funding in Congress, we as the people vote them in. So
Hmm.
just remember you have a say so. Show up, do your due diligence, um, and you know, as Americans or in the United States, we can call our Congress peoples, things like that as well. If there are certain ways, um, things you want to mention, I don't know. So just want to encourage everyone
Yeah.
here to, I don't know, not even just sit on the wayside. Like,
Hmm.
if you want to get involved, figure out how to do that in your local community, things of that nature. I mean, even where I live now, when it comes to, just on the topic of funding,
Hmm.
our insurance costs for our county increased 30% year over year from 2024 to
Hmm.
2025. The county is $1 million in the hole. Or in I was watching the live stream and the county, and they're just trying to figure out how they're going to find $1 million. Well, guess what? If they're not able to figure out where to cut back, that means property taxes have to increase because the money has to come from somewhere. So it's these things are important. Ignorance is bliss. I don't think works in with some of this stuff,
Hmm.
or so I don't know. Just some encouragement.
No.
These things affect all of our life, and we can have a positive impact individually
Mhm.
too.
Yeah, and it's like you're saying, like get involved locally. I think a lot of times people just, you do your one vote and you're like, okay, I'm done. But also hold those people accountable that you voted for, to make sure that they follow through on those things. And, your one voice you might feel like it's not heard, but if somebody might see what you're doing and then also want to tag along and also, help you voice that as well. So always just make sure you're not taking everything at face value. I think that's the biggest thing. Like,
Yes.
um, those people that work in that system will have up that facade for you to see, and for you to like believe as what that is, but always like dig deeper, try to figure out what it is, and why they might not be acting in the way that you voted for them. And that's, like I said, at the local level all the way up to the state level, all the way up to the federal level. You go to those persons, people, to make sure that they upheld a certain standard and those things that you believe in. So make sure you hold them accountable. And then if the time comes around and they have not made those things that they promised or whatever that looks like, make sure that you put the right person in place. It's that simple. So um, pay attention to terms and all that stuff so you know when people are coming up, and just don't let it, oh well, I'm not really worried about it, or it's whatever. I think, like I said, like a lot of times people are just like it's out of their hands, or they feel like they have no power, but the power is in the hand of the people. So, but yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. But we appreciate you guys for tuning in. Again, you can check us weekly, as we try to stay consistent on that. Just talking about some of those financial and economic impacts, as they come up. So please let us know if there's anything in the comments that you guys want us to talk about. Like, comment, and subscribe as well. And yeah, let us know what you think about the government shutdown, your thoughts and opinions. We appreciate you guys. We'll catch you next week.